All right. Hey, girl, how are you?
Hi, I'm so good. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited for you to be here too. As soon as I heard your podcast and met you in the cohort that we are in, well, met you virtually, but
Yes,
not really. We're like, wait, we know each other, but we kind of don't at the same time.
totally.
I knew that I wanted to have you on this podcast just because I think that you are amazing and I love your story and I love what you are doing. And so I know that the audience and our listeners will get just so much from you in this interview today.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just tell the listeners a little bit about you. So Alana Gentry, aka Alana Banana, there we
Yeah.
go, is a songwriter, a foster mama, and a kids content creator. She's been teaching music to kids for over a decade, has 3 children's albums, and over 50, which I think is so awesome,
Hmm.
videos on YouTube as the Alana Banana Show. Aside from working with kids, Alana has been practicing yoga, meditation, and personal development for over 20 years. She's the host of the new podcast, Inspired Grownups, sharing stories of resilience and people who are making an impact in the world. So you are doing so much.
Oh, yes. When you say it all together, wow. Okay.
It's like take a breath, right?
Yes, one day at a time. Yes.
Yeah, I would love to just kind of dive into your story a little bit and your journey, whatever you want to share, wherever you feel called to kind of start in your journey and your practice of everything that I kind of just read.
Hmm.
What would you love to start with and kind of tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Wow. Well, I guess, I mean, when you talk about, the personal development, the yoga meditation that did start so long ago in my early 20s, I always played music. I guess music and yoga meditation merged. They were always both passions of mine. I got into yoga because I grew up dancing, actually,
Okay.
tap, jazz, ballet. And as I got into my 20s, I still danced, but I just wanted something, a practice that kept me flexible, really. And that felt good. It was more of a just exercise in the beginning. But then as I got more into it, I realized the whole spiritual side of it and meditative side of it. And I just felt the benefits of that. So I dove into that more fully. So yeah, in my 20s, I was playing music. I had a band. That's where I met my husband. We were in a band together for many years before we ever became a couple. One of those stories.
That's cool.
And yeah, yeah. And it wasn't until my 30s, early 30s, that I shifted into children's music. And really that was because, well, we talked a little bit before we started recording about uh, both of us being in the restaurant industry. All through my 20s, I was waiting tables because as a musician, that was what was the best job for me. I had the most flexibility. I worked at a couple of high-end restaurants. Since I'm from Los Angeles, I worked in Beverly Hills for a while, and I met some of my best friends at the restaurant I worked at
Yeah.
there. And I actually really liked being in the restaurant industry. I felt like it was just socialization, really. I was just hanging out with people. I mean, yeah, it
Yeah.
was, and I it was also like a workout, right? I was
So true.
running around, but I just like people and I love hearing people's stories. So it was fun for me, the people I worked with, the people I would meet and I would serve. And that was my I guess outlook on waiting tables, was just being a people person and hanging
Yeah.
out. And um which, now that I look back and I have a podcast, I'm like, oh, it makes sense. I like hearing people's stories.
Absolutely.
Because when you hear people's stories, it inspires your own life, or for me anyway, inspires my life to hear what people went through and how they got through what they did. But I moved to New York for a couple of years. I didn't mention that to you before.
Oh, okay.
In my late 20s, I was just, I just needed a break from Los Angeles, and I had some friends in New York, and I continued to wait tables out there and write music. But as time went on, I just wasn't so inspired to like strive for that record deal and, you know, try to have, this uh life that I envisioned for myself of touring the world and all of those things, I was really questioning, well, why do I want that? I guess my whole life as a kid, I grew up singing and dancing and performing. So I had this vision of, especially growing up in Los Angeles. I mean, I was surrounded by people in the industry, and I did some work as a kid in the industry. So I just strove for that. But when I grew up, I thought, well, is that what I really want? Why do I want that? And I had to kind of deconstruct my ego a bit.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
and yoga really helped me tune into what I really wanted inside. And there were a few years there where I felt very lost. And I was, because when you have this idea of what you want for yourself and it's not coming about the way you want, then you're questioning everything.
Right.
And so I put music on hold and I just dove into my yoga practice. I became a yoga teacher. I was meditating daily and really rediscovering myself in my early 30s. And at that time, a lot of my friends started having children. And so I would help them out with their kids. I moved back to Los Angeles and I would babysit for my friends' kids. I was doing some work singing for television promos. So I was doing some music work. And I also, at this time in my 20s, became a massage therapist. So I have all these passions, all these things.
I
I'm like,
love it.
well, I love yoga, I love music, and I love healing. And massage therapy just felt good to me. That felt like the right thing. So I had a private clientele that I would go to people's houses here in LA. And I was just doing those things part-time, music, massage, helping my friends with their kids. And one of my friends said, you should write children's music. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that. And she was like, well, I think you should. And it was like in the back of my mind, but I wasn't like, yes, that's what I should do.
Right.
But the more I started hanging out with my friends' kids, I would just come up with these silly songs. And one day I decided, well, my whole life, people have been calling me Alana Banana because most people do pronounce my name Alana. My parents,
I practice for like 10 minutes.
yeah, and it doesn't bother me. I said
Yeah.
before, it really doesn't bother me. My parents are originally from Texas, so I think it's a Southern accent thing, Alana. Although they don't have a big accent, but
Yeah.
they're from Texas, so everybody in LA though says Alana, and not just Los Angeles, in the States,
Right. And
besides the
I do.
South.
I think it's beautiful though. Like I
Oh,
love your
thanks.
name and I think it's beautiful. And it's not my name, but like however it's pronounced, I'm sure just I don't know. It just sounds I don't know. It sounds like a song should be written about it. I don't know. Maybe you did write one. I don't know.
No, I haven't. But that's a fun idea.
Yeah.
Um, so Alana Banana was just a nickname because that's just an easy way for people to remember how to say my name. So when I thought, well, I could do kids music and I'll just be Alana Banana. And once I made that choice, I felt completely charged up again. I felt very inspired and everything just started to flow.
Yeah.
And that's when I'm like, okay,
Absolutely.
I don't need to, like I said before, get a record deal, all these things. I could just create whatever I want. I think in our 30s, I mean, some people know early what they want to do and they just go for it. But I think we're always rediscovering ourselves. And that's a fun thing about life. I mean, even now in my 40s, starting this podcast, I never thought I would do that,
Yeah.
but it keeps life fun and exciting. So yeah, once I chose to make children's music, everything just felt good again. And
Wow. So so when I'm so curious about that. So what kind of music would you say like you wrote before you're writing children's music? Did you have like a genre or was it like love songs or like
oh,
what were you writing about or was it just like anything? Were you like Taylor Swift? Like I'll write about anything.
oh, I was definitely all about the love songs. I mean, I would say it would be like folk pop, at this time. It was like the 90s. I mean, I'm 46 right now. So this
I'm
was,
44, so similar.
yeah. When I first started playing guitar in my early 20s, it was like Alanis Morissette. That was like pop rock, Sarah McLachlan, Jewel. That
I
was,
was thinking Joel. I was like, oh my God.
yeah,
Like all those, I listened to all those ladies.
that was my vibe at the time. And definitely, a young lover, had lots of, you know, I would say a serial monogamist, but I like to write about it,
Yeah.
definitely. And so lots of love songs. That's what inspired me the most.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when you started with like the kids music, then
Mm.
what did that look like? So were you writing songs and like did you have like kids camps or would you just kind of put songs out on YouTube? Or I know you
Mm.
have, album and stuff too, but like what
Yeah.
did you do with your music once you wrote it? Did you like invite kids over and like sing to them?
Yeah. Well, so I was originally helping my friends with their kids, and then I got into writing music and I created the Alana Banana Band. That's how it started. And at this point, my husband and I were together. We, when I moved back from New York, our relationship shifted from friends to more.
Yeah.
And we co-write together. It's funny because when we tried to write adult songs together in the past, it didn't really work that well. We wrote a few songs, but it felt like work.
Yeah.
And then when I said, let's write some kid songs, it just was so easy, so fun, so lighthearted. And it started with a fish, actually. And our song is called Frampton the Fish. And I was, before Eric, my husband and I lived together, I was living with a friend named Stacy, and she had a betta fish, a blue betta fish named Frampton. And he would hide in his shell at the bottom of the bowl and then come up and get air, which I didn't realize betta fish have to come up and they actually breathe air. It's so weird,
Cool.
but they do.
Yeah.
So we were sitting there trying to write a song, and I was like, let's just write about the fish. This was the first children's song we ever wrote. And he came up with this line that if you listen to our song Frampton the Fish, you can find it anywhere that you stream music. um, it was just funny and it just flowed. And so from that song, Frampton the Fish, we just started writing other songs. And in this time, a friend of a friend started a company that was creating parent to me classes, like preschool
Yeah.
classes. And she asked me to be a teacher. Now, I didn't have my degree in children's education, but because it wasn't a official preschool and the parents were going to be there, she was like, I don't care. You have a lot of experience with children. I want someone that plays music for children. And she created the curriculum. She had her master's in children's education, and she did have me take a lot of parenting classes like on the side, that she provided for me and the other teachers. So that was my start into teaching kids. And it was really fun. Like, parents of 18-month-olds and 2-year-olds would come for an hour and a half, and it was free play with small motor skill toys. And then we'd have 20 minutes of music time, and then a snack time, and then a story time, and then large motor skill.
Yeah.
And that was my intro. So that I would test out songs with kids there. And through that experience, I worked there for 5 years. I recorded our first album under the Alana Banana Band. And we were playing shows in LA, just, out wherever kid shows happen here.
Yeah. Okay.
And then through that, one of my friends who I was helping with his child, he said, well, you should have a show for kids. You should create a television show. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. I don't know how to do that, but that would, yeah. And he at the time was working at Sony Animation. So he was working with children's movies, and I knew how to record music. We both didn't really know about the children's television industry, but we're like, let's create a company. Let's, create a show. And so that's how the Alana Banana Show started. So I didn't have anything on YouTube until we created a production company, had an investment, and created a show that inspired us the way Sesame Street inspired us, with
Yeah.
live action, puppets, a little animation. And it was a huge learning experience creating a pilot for a show. And it continues to be a learning experience because
Yeah.
we're
So
still in it.
how many episodes have you done then of the Alana Banana Show?
Well, we did an initial pilot and we went to a few children's television conferences and learned so much. And there's really, like any industry, if you haven't gotten into, there's just a lot to learn. So we were like sponges, just taking it all in and getting a lot of great feedback. As far as full episodes, we just did the one pilot, but
Okay.
then we started creating small little videos.
Okay.
And that's what we've continued to do. A lot of the feedback we received was, well, we'd really love all animation because you can sell it anywhere in the world. Also, ours was a variety show, so more story based, with social emotional messages.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of the networks were looking for at the time. And so since then, right before COVID, we actually did create an all animated version, story based. We haven't pitched it yet. We're still kind of holding on to it and just not sure where we're going to go yet with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it keeps evolving and I don't know where it's going to take us. We would like to do a children's podcast too, like for story time for preschoolers.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
So we'll see.
That's
It's a lot to do. So now that I'm a mama too, it's my time balancing the time of work and parenting, as you know, can be a juggling act.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes back to also like when you talked about like the striving. So, before it was like, oh, do I even want to have like strive to like make a record deal and then push and then tour and then do all these things? Like, do I even want to do that? Or is that the story that's been like sold to me that like that's the only way I can be successful? Or like that's how you have to be successful is this one way when there's so many ways to do things. But then when you add, kids into the mix, it just adds a whole nother layer of that questioning. And I just have been going through this again myself. I have a 12, a 15, and then I have a 29-year-old stepson. But just again, like sitting back with myself and being like, what does success mean to me? Like, what am I doing? Like, do these things bring me joy? Is this something I really want to spend my time doing? And then why do I want to do it? And so, when you become a mom, it's like, okay, you want to be successful and you want to do all these things, but then it's like, but why? Is it for me or is it for others? So is that what you've kind of been, are you reevaluating again, now that you do have a little one and being like, is this really what I want to do? And you kind of question things a lot more.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's also a thing of like when you put your art out there, there's always going to be people who want you to change it.
Yeah.
Oh, do it like this. This is what sells. Do it like this. Or there's other people who are like, no, it's great the way it is. And you're never going to please everybody. So there's this thing of taking in the constructive criticism. Okay, would this make it better if we changed it? Or, well, I really still believe in this and I don't have to please everybody. And I want to still put it out this way. So there's a little bit of that going on of, okay, a lot of people are saying you should change it to be this, but we also know that when it comes to art, I mean, a lot of shows, a lot of things that happen in the world that are artistic, they didn't really, I guess, have their full light shined on them years later. Right. Like Jim Henson, it took him 10 years to get the Muppets off the ground.
Yeah.
A lot of stories we heard it takes, 4, 5, 6 years to get a show off the ground. I still would like to have the Alana Banana Show be out there in a bigger way. I am also very open to co-creating it and changing and evolving if it feels right. Whatever, say, another production company we partner with, when that feels right. But right now I do have a toddler at home and she is in part-time daycare. So I teach baby toddler music classes as well here. Just a few hours, 8 hours a week. But so she's in part-time daycare. I don't really want to put her in full-time daycare right now. I love having the time with her. And I'm also, because I'm a foster mama, I want that time with her. And I want to be somebody who is very influential in her life and day, but she's going to grow. And when she gets ready to go to school longer, then I'll be ready to work more. Like right now with the podcast, I get to work when she naps. I can work on it when she's asleep. So I find those pockets of time. But actually, if we were to sell the Alana Banana Show and make it bigger than it is right now, that's going to be a real full-time job.
Mhm.
So I don't mind waiting on that until she's a little older and in school full-time.
Mhm.
And also another reason why I want to have it be bigger is because I do want to create jobs for other great artists that I know. I'm happy to give a lot of the work away. I think what I love to do the most is write music. So if I'm just writing music for the show and co-writing, I love co-writing as well. If I'm just writing, co-writing and the voice of Alana Banana, then I'm happy to give all the other jobs away to other people.
Delegation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one thing I would like to create is more jobs, creative jobs for great artists that I know in the world. So,
I love that. That's so beautiful. And just like your vision of what it can be if the timing is right or when the time
right.
is right, and then not forcing it to be like, I have to do it now. Now's the time. That's what I think is so beautiful about what you are doing too, is it's like, okay, well, I'm open to change and shift if I need to, but also I want to stay true to the message and what it is.
Right.
So it's blending all of that together, which I just think is beautiful. And it's there's no one that can tell you the way to do that. It's what's inside of you and what feels right to you. And I think that's great. And your yoga and your meditation and all of that is probably playing a part in that too, in being able to help you self-center into what's the best for you and what you see going forward.
Definitely. I mean, my yoga practice is definitely different than it was before I had a child. I mean, I used to take classes all the time and COVID changed that as well. I no longer really go to the studio. I'm doing it at home, but I mean, I just get 10 minutes in here, 15 minutes there. And I tell people I think that's better than nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
my meditation, if I only have 5 minutes, I had 10 minutes this morning and that was good. That was great. I just the time for me to check in, get centered and think, "Oh, what's the plan for today? That's all I have is today. So how do I want to use my energy today? And if I don't feel called to work, and do all these things on my to-do list, then I don't do that because I think life should be enjoyed.
Yeah.
And like I said, I really love hanging out with our girl and just being present with her. I think kids are, especially when they're young like that, they are so present.
Hmm.
So it's easy with our devices and just the life we have around us to get so distracted. But I feel like she's my walking, or I should say running right now, reminder to just be with her, you know.
Yeah, they're so innocent and just amazing at that age too, where everything
Mhm.
is just like wondering about everything and just so curious. And
Yeah.
I think as adults, we sometimes tend to lose that curiosity and that openness to new things because we're so like, this is our schedule and this is what I do and this is my routine. And so sometimes we don't leave ourselves enough open time to be curious. And I love that about little ones is
Yeah.
because they're just curious about everything, whether it's good or not.
I
Don't touch
know.
the stove, like
Oh yeah,
they're
that was this
curious.
morning. Don't
Oh,
touch the
this
stove. Don't climb on the table. Or like, oh, let's not climb on the table. How about we sit in the chair? Yeah.
I know. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time since I've had a toddler, but those are great, great memories for sure. Would you, I know that you touched on this a little bit when you were just talking about her and just being a foster mama, but do you want to, jump in a little bit to that part of your journey and where how that happened for you and a little bit about
Sure.
that? I think it would be amazing for other moms who maybe are in the same position or just to kind of hear your journey.
Yeah. Yes, I always envisioned myself being an older mom. My brother's 10 years younger than me. So when I was 10, he was born and I was just in love instantly and I was a mini mom. So ever since then, I knew I wanted to be a mom and I just saw myself doing it when I was older. Now I wonder, my mom had my brother at 41 and he was a surprise. She was told she couldn't get pregnant again.
Oh, wow.
So I just in my mind thought, well, that can happen. Like I just didn't think, nobody told me that people had fertility issues ever.
Yeah, it's not something
Uh,
that's talked about.
totally. And I just always saw myself wanting a career as well. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll have my career and then I'll have children. And Eric and I didn't get married until we were in our mid 30s.
Okay.
So at that point, I was just getting the music, the albums going. And I thought, well, I have a few more years. I want to get this show off the ground. And I was open to getting pregnant, but it just didn't happen. So by the time I was 39 and it'd been a few years and I hadn't gotten pregnant, you try so hard not to get pregnant for so long, or I did anyway.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, this is not happening. Okay. I had friends that said, why don't you just go get, checked out just to see if there's any issues. And I thought, okay, I guess that's the responsible thing to do. Or I was curious too. So we had some tests done and there was nothing that stood out as like, this is why you're not getting pregnant.
Okay.
The only thing they said is you're old. you're older, which in my mind, I mean, even now at my age, I feel so young. And I think it has a lot to do with working with kids. And
Yeah.
that's just,
Well,
yeah.
but I think your spirit,
Yeah,
young, and it's all what you put in your head, and you've done personal development and you've done yoga and you've done meditation. So you've done work on that too, where it's like age is just a number, you know what I mean?
exactly.
It's how you feel and how you live your life too. That is how your age is going to play into it. So you probably were just like, yeah, I have all these things. I have all this time. And
Totally.
you're a waitress. So like you're running around. So you're like, I'm good. My heart's good.
Yeah. So they were saying, oh, it's just because you're older. And yeah, my mom is very into natural healing. I mean, she definitely believes in Western medicine, but she would always go to the natural route first for us, before anything else. So I wasn't really inclined to do IVF or anything at first. I really wanted to try, well, I'll try acupuncture and just, I ate healthy, but just, cleaning up my diet and making sure I wasn't stressed. And, um, but after a while that wasn't really working. So we decided to do IUI. And for those, I think a lot of people know what that is, but it's basically insemination.
Okay.
It's the step a lot of people do before IVF because it's not as invasive and it's not as expensive either.
Okay.
You basically, they do ultrasounds to see when you're ovulating, and then they get a sperm sample from your partner, and they spin it, which is crazy. It's crazy what they can do with technology. They get the best sperm. And then when you're
Ones that rise to
ovulating,
the top? Or are they like the ones
I,
that rises to the top?
I have no idea. I don't know how they get the best sperm. I just heard they spin it and they get the best sperm. I'm like, okay, that sounds
All right.
crazy, but good. And then they, and you've heard people joke about it as like a turkey baster, but with an actual tool, they inject it up into the uterus when you're ovulating.
Okay.
And most people do take medication with it. Clomid is a big one, just a pill you can take. It stimulates ovulation. So that works for a lot of women. And sometimes you will have twins because if it's stimulating your ovulation, there'll be a couple of follicles. And so we ended up doing 3 rounds of that and nothing, I still didn't get pregnant. And so I took a break for a couple years actually.
Yeah.
And was going back and forth. I'm trying to do a lot of the emotional work around it as well of, okay, well, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So I realized there was a part of me that wanted that, but I also wanted a career. And there was this internal battle inside of like, okay, well, that might be one cause of maybe why I'm not getting pregnant, maybe stress. I don't know. By the time I was 41, I was going back to acupuncture weekly. I had a friend who in her mid 40s got pregnant naturally. And I've heard stories of that all the time. So I just felt like that was going to happen for me.
Right.
But after 6 months, my acupuncturist said, why don't you go see this fertility doctor who's a friend of mine? And I thought, oh, he's just going to want me to do IVF. She's like, yeah, I know, but just see what he has to say.
Right.
So I did. And of course, he did want me to get IVF, but he was saying a lot about the statistics, which I don't love all the statistics, but I also didn't want to be blind to the fact that, okay, as you get older, your egg quality does decrease. And he said, well, you're 41 now. If you don't do IVF and you wait a few years, you're even going to have half of the amount of eggs as you do now. So my husband and I talked about it and we said, look, if we don't try it, we're always going to wonder.
Absolutely.
So I figured, well, let's just try it. And of course, cost is a big thing. IVF is very expensive. But after talking with family and friends, we got a lot of support in that department. So we decided to just go for it because, again, I always would have wondered. So we did a round of IVF, and that is very invasive. You're giving yourself shots every day. You're getting ultrasounds every other day. They're taking blood work every other day. You're stimulating your ovulation. You're very hormonal. I was doing acupuncture in conjunction with that, which I think helped a lot with the hormones and the emotion that went on. But there's a lot riding on it because you're like, this has to work, right?
Like your last hope. I mean, is that how you felt?
Yeah.
Like, this is it. This is like my last shot if what I've done before hasn't worked.
Yeah. And I was trying not to stress out, but I'm also like, okay, all these people have invested in us and it has to work. That was kind of how I was thinking. And I was doing visualizations and meditations. And so they basically gather, you have a minor surgery, they put you under, once your follicles are stimulated enough where you would be ovulating, they gather the follicles and then they get a sperm sample from your partner and then they put it together and they watch them. The zygotes, I guess they're called. They watch them for 5 days and see how they grow. And they can tell after 5 to 6, 7 days if they think it will be a viable embryo
Oh,
to
wow.
transfer. Yeah, it's really, science is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And they only had 3 embryos that they thought would be good. Actually 2. And the doctor said, well, this isn't really a good, we want more than this to transfer because realistically, if we transfer these 2, they probably won't take. I'm like, what? So he's like, we should do it again. I'm like, what?
Of course, we should do it again.
Yeah. So long story short, we ended up doing 3 rounds of IVF to gather embryos. We figured we're already in it. We're just going to go for it. And after those 3 rounds, we actually only had 3 embryos. And
Wow.
since we were in it, they do suggest after 40 that you get genetic testing done on them because a lot of times, and you may or may not know this, when women miscarry, it's because the embryo isn't really a healthy embryo. So your body is really protecting you. And that's why you miscarry. So they did the genetic testing on all 3 and we waited a few weeks. And then basically we found out none of them were viable.
Oh my
If
goodness.
they were to transfer any of them, I just would have miscarried. So of course it was a huge disappointment.
Right.
And you and I spoke a little bit before we recorded about Hawaii and how much we love Hawaii. My husband and I actually had a trip planned to Maui the day after we got this news. He was working out there and I decided to go along thinking, well, this could be our our last trip without a child for a while.
Yeah.
Or if it doesn't work out, I'll need this trip for healing. So that trip was the best thing that could have happened to us at that time, because it's really hard to be sad when you're in such a beautiful place like Maui. But it also created a lot of healing. I mean, I would get in the ocean every day and just cry and let myself process, but also feel so grateful, have so much gratitude for the beauty that was around me and trusting that there's a bigger picture. That was where my yoga practice and my connection to spirit, source, whatever you want to call it, God, that was where I just had to surrender and think, okay, there's a bigger picture I don't know about right now. And I'm so sad and so lost, but I know that there's something else coming for me. And I don't know what that is, but I know I have to just let it go and let life evolve and just see what shows up and trust that something better is coming for me.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so it was
For sharing that, because I'm sure that so many people, or if people are going through like IVF right now or going through something like that, I'm sure it has to be that emotional, like up and down, like the roller coaster. Especially you did it 3 times, and then to have that message at the end, it's not going to work. I'm sure that those emotions had to be running high. So thank you for sharing that, because if you didn't have that yoga practice or if you didn't have that meditation practice, then your mind could have just, kept you down and sad, which I'm sure you were, but you were able to look like, well, maybe there's something better coming, or
Yeah.
maybe there's a reason that this isn't happening for me. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a beautiful message of hope for others.
Yeah. It definitely, you have to let yourself process, of course. And I did a lot of that after, but I just kept coming back to, okay, there's just something else for me. And I have so much in my life, gratitude, really coming
Yeah.
back to the little things that I'm grateful for. And I got to a place of being okay of not being a parent, because I'm like, why should I push so hard
Yeah.
if this isn't supposed to happen? Okay, well, great. My husband and I can travel. We can have this freedom, all this freedom that comes when you're not a parent. And I got to a place of really being okay with that. But the message kept coming, no, you're meant to be a mother. You're meant to be a mother. And I'm like, well, then show me the way, because I
Yeah.
don't know how to
Right.
go. And then all of these synchronicities started about adoption and fostering. And this was something we talked about years ago, but never seriously. But I could not deny these synchronicities that kept popping up with books that I would read or podcasts I would listen to that I didn't know when I got into it had an adoption story
Yeah.
or a fostering story.
Can you hold on? Can you stop for a
Mhm.
second? Because I think some people, like you and I think share a lot of the same beliefs and things like that. And when you see messages come through, then you
Mhm.
can see the signs, right? But a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know, like, what do you mean by that? Like, what does that even mean? And because we are just looking for that opportunity, or it's like, oh, well, I've noticed that there's these 4 things that have talked about fostering, but you have to be open to it. Can you talk a little bit about like what that looked like for you?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people don't know, like, what are the signs, like what are the synchronicities, like what do you mean by that? Because a lot of people aren't, and they all these things happen and then they just aren't open to the possibility, so they don't notice that those are actually messages being sent to them, like
Mm.
maybe there's another way.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Yeah, I love to talk about it. I think it's something that, like you said, you have to just be open to.
Yeah.
I think when you're open like that, then you start to take notice of songs that might play on the radio. And I think it's something for me when a synchronicity or a sign, comes through, there's something inside me that's like, oh, it's like it lights up a
Yeah.
little bit, but it's subtle. But I think the more that you listen or it's like an excitement inside. And it's kind of hard to explain
Yeah.
because it's just a feeling. But I think the more you, I don't know, I would say maybe honor that feeling or acknowledge the feeling that kind of lights you up a little bit, that is taking notice of it.
Yeah.
And some people might be like, oh, am I really getting like signs from the universe or symbols? But to me, that's just what makes life kind of fun and magical and
Yeah.
exciting. It could be like a game, right?
Right.
It doesn't have to be so serious,
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm getting a sign from the universe or like, spirit, whatever. It could just be like, oh, when I see things like the adoption fostering show up multiple times, sometimes it has to show up a couple times till you actually take notice.
Yeah.
But I think if there's something that comes into your life a couple times, and it might be having to do with something you really want or something you're hoping for or something that you love, like say you want to take a dance class as an adult but you're afraid to, but then you see all these signs about like a class or somebody else doing it, that's your synchronicity, that's your message, right?
Yeah.
And it's so personal to everybody. So I think it's, you might think in your mind, am I crazy thinking about that? But no, I think
Yeah.
that's just the fun of life. So for me with the fostering, I went, it started with a silent retreat that I went on for a few days that I wanted to do. I'd always wanted to try it down at the beach near San Diego in California. I just wanted some space, some time to myself. I did a lot of writing. I did a lot of resting, meditating. And through my writing and even dreams I would have, that's when the message was like, no, you're still going to be a mother. And once I got out of that retreat, I would go to the library, pick up a book. I love memoirs. That's another reason why I started a podcast, because I want to hear people's stories. I love memoirs. I picked up this book. I had no idea that the memoir had to do with this woman adopting a child. but that's what happened. And then I would listen to a podcast. I had no idea that this podcast had anything to do with somebody fostering a child. And then I would meet a person who knew somebody who told me that they fostered a child. Those are the synchronicities that started
Yeah.
popping up. And I just got to a place where I couldn't deny it. So I brought it up to Eric, my husband. And then here's another one. He said, I've been thinking about the same thing for the last 2 months, but we hadn't talked about it.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So when that happened, we were crying on the couch saying, let's do it. Let's do it. And that's when we decided to research private adoption versus foster to adopt. And for us, once we learned more, we felt like foster to adopt was the way to go for us.
Okay.
So
And
that's
so
what we did.
how did that happen? Like, how did you find your little girl? Because I know that it is a process. Um,
Yeah.
isn't it? I mean, I'm assuming from conversations that I've had, I've never fostered or adopted, but
Mm.
from what I've heard from others, it is a very arduous process to go through as well.
Yeah. We had somebody say, go to a couple different foster agencies and just feel out their vibe, see which place you feel like you connect with the most, which I think is good advice. So we went to one and it was good. It was great. I mean, I think anybody that's doing that work, you're going to think this is, a nice place to be. But then we went to this other one and I just loved the woman who was training. It was in orientation, but she would be the one who was training us. Her and the woman who takes the intake calls. Immediately, I just thought, I need to know these women. I love everything they're saying. I felt something in my body change, and I knew that's where we were supposed to be. And I actually just today, well, I know this won't be coming out for a few weeks, but I
Yeah.
just released a podcast episode on my show with her. Actually,
Oh,
Yvonne Favela is her name. And because she's changed my life and she's so inspiring and has such an amazing perspective on fostering. So I wanted to have her on the show. But we got into the training process and it was 3 full weekends of in-person training. And we actually did it right before COVID. So I was glad we had some in-person because you got to meet other parents, people who were doing it. And you just learn a lot about why children are in the system, why the biological parents might be going through a hard time, and helping you to really develop that muscle for compassion and empathy and non-judgment and
yeah.
being of service in this way, because the goal really is reunification with the biological family, if at all possible.
Yeah.
But if it's not, then some people do it just to foster, but we wanted to adopt and we still do. So that is what we would like. But at the same time, if a biological parent shows us that they are doing everything they need to do to change their life, to get their life together, then we're going to support them in that as well. And that's what happened with our first child. So it took us 6 months
Okay.
to get, I think 6 months is like the minimum to get trained. You have to do a lot of interviewing. They basically learn everything about your life.
Yeah. Right. But they need to know that like a child's going to be safe going into your home.
Exactly.
So I would highly expect them to do a lot of that intake and
Mhm.
interviewing process to make
Yeah,
sure it's a safe place to have a child come into.
definitely. And they ask you really hard questions about your upbringing too, and a lot of back history, not just, emotional history too, because they want to know that you're going to be a safe person for this child to be raised by. Home checks, all of those things. And then once you get approved, then you're just like waiting by your phone, and you can say what age range you're hoping for and open to. Um, and so for us, we knew an infant. I also, because I've worked with babies and toddlers for so long, I know how important the first 3 years are in a child's development. And I wanted to be that for somebody.
Yeah.
And if I'm being real and honest too, any child, even a child just taken from birth, is going to experience trauma from that separation from their biological parent. But I also know that the younger they are, the less trauma, hopefully, they'll endure. So for me, because I'm new at this, I wanted that. And I also have 2 small dogs that needed some adjustment to a child in our home.
Yeah.
So we said we wanted, 0 to 1. age range. So we had a newborn first, a 10-day-old baby, and we had him for 3 months. And then he moved on, which was so heartbreaking for us, but we knew it was the right thing to do. He moved to a place where his brother was, and since then have reunited with their mother, which we completely supported. She did everything she was needing to do. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of emotion that goes into it, a lot of mixed feelings. But I know I'm going into it supporting the biological parent until they show me otherwise, until they
Right.
show me that they're not they really have no interest or don't want to help themselves. I'm going to support them in getting their life together and helping them with their child. So that's what we did. And then 3 weeks after he left, we got a 3-month-old girl who's still with us now. And so she's been with us for 15 months.
Wow.
And it seems like it's going towards adoption, which
Mm.
as yeah, which again, I hope that happens for all of us. It's also sad too. Like then there's this whole I want to say basket of emotions, of mixed feelings,
Right.
because we still see her biological mom and her grandmother. We get along. It was also a very important thing for me to create a good relationship, because no matter what, they're going to be her biological family, whether we adopt or not. And if we do adopt, she's always going to know her story, and her mother. We don't know what those boundaries are going to look like moving forward as far as how often they will see each other. We still need a lot of counseling around that. And that's another good reason to get into an agency, is because they can help you with all those things. There's a
Yeah.
lot of counseling in place, and for fostering aspect, but then also when you move towards adoption.
How long? So if you've already had her for 15 months, like at what point is that decision made that, okay, we think adoption is the best route? Like, is there a time frame or is it
Yeah.
individual based? Like 15 months to me seems like a really long time, but I don't know, the process, or like, what is there a time frame where they're like, okay, this is it? Or does the parent have to say, okay,
Yeah.
I'm I'm not gonna be able to do what I need to do? How is that decided?
hmm They usually give up to 2 years.
Okay.
And there are some circumstances where a parent will say that, and that's called safe surrender, where a parent will say, I know this is not what I can handle, and I'm ready to give up my rights, but that's rare. I
Yeah.
think a lot of parents, and I know in our circumstance, they do love their child and they do want to heal their life, but they're also, a lot of them are coming from trauma from their own life.
Mm.
And the court and the state does provide reunification services, which is happening on our side as well, which is therapy and parenting classes and all of these things. But sometimes the parent just doesn't step into it as much as they can or should. And um, it's sad because, again, they're navigating from a place of, their own history. And I can't expect somebody to have the same belief system as me, or, I have a lot of compassion for her and for, any biological parent going through this, but it's, it's hard. It's
Yeah.
just, there's usually a court hearing every 3 to 6 months, and they reevaluate. And once it gets to a point where if they realize the biological parent isn't doing what they should be or could be to be a stable home for this child, then they're going to terminate their parental rights.
Okay.
So once they set a hearing for that, um, then it can move to adoption, which takes another like 3 to 6 months. So
Right.
all in all, it can take about 2.5 years, but yeah, it's a
We'll have to
long process.
give us, an update on how things are going or where they stand, and fill us in.
Yeah, it's yeah, this I feel has been one of my biggest spiritual tests or journeys. I think my yoga practice has helped me practice presence. And like I said before, children do that too. But being in this situation really has made me practice it even more. Every day I have to wake up and say, because it's easy for your mind to spin into what if, what if this happens? What if that happens? But I'm like, well, right now in this moment, this is all I have. And in this moment, I'm able to create a loving, stable home for our girl. I'm able to share what I love with her. I'm able to create music, do all the things I love. And so I remind myself daily to stay in that space and to visualize the outcome I want. And if that doesn't work out, then I deal with it then. But that's the healthiest way for me to handle it. Because, and don't get me wrong, there are days where I might be crying in my bathtub, because it's, we're still navigating this court system and having a relationship with this, biological family. And it's sometimes frustrating.
Because I'm sure
So
you're like, yay, like go mom, like you want the best, but then you're like, yeah, but like go me, like,
yeah, I
like
want her to get healing, but I also want, because I'm in love with her daughter, I want to give her the best home and life that she can have.
right.
But a good thing is that her mom does acknowledge me as her. We were like, she'll always know she has two mamas, and
Aw.
she's very gracious to us. So that helps. It's not always the case. I've heard many, many stories of foster parents who don't get along with biological parents. And that I can only imagine would create so much difficulty. So at least I've been able to create peace between these relationships. And
Yeah.
so
Now,
far,
when you have her, does the foster agency, like when you have a child, do they call you and ask you for other children, like during this
mm,
time frame, or like once you have one, like you're kind of out until like either way, whatever happens, or do they call you and you're like, no, I can or I can't?
yeah, that's really up to you. I mean, we're in a 1 bedroom, so we basically don't have room for more children right
Yeah.
now. um, but we will probably move in the next year. I mean, we're growing out of our space. Um, but we love where we live, so it's hard. Yeah, if there are people who have children already, foster children, and they have room and they're open to more, and they just take them in.
Mm,
I mean, I don't think you can have more than like 3, maybe. I mean, I'm not sure exactly. I think it depends on your space. But a
yeah.
lot of people take in siblings, and that's really important because I think it's so important for siblings to stay together, and it's really sad when they're not together, which was why our first placement, they call it a placement, when he moved on, because he really needed to be with his brother.
Right.
But the foster mom who had his brother had another baby at the time. It didn't have room. So once that other baby moved on, then they could reunite the brothers and have them bond. And which was the best thing for them to bond before they reunited with their mom. But um yeah, so it's really up to the foster parent how many children they want to have.
Yeah, I was gonna say just hearing you too and like writing music and then doing your podcast, I would think that that creativity is also an outlet for you
Mm,
for your emotions or like kind of what you're going through or a way. It's almost like I look at like the podcast as therapy sometimes.
yeah.
It's things that I need to get off my chest. So do you kind of look at that as the same way of kind of what you're going through and navigating, like as your music as like, you're not maybe writing about like, oh my gosh, the emotional roller coaster and singing it to kids, but
Yeah,
you feel like that's your creativity outlet that you can have with the podcast and your music.
definitely. I never really shared my fertility story publicly until I did the podcast, which
Yeah.
wasn't until this January. I mean, my friends knew it, of course, um, but I decided to share it because I know I get so much out of hearing people's real stories.
Mhm.
And so I thought, I'm sure there's tons of other women who have gone through fertility issues or maybe who have been curious about fostering. And so on my show, I am having, you know, I do talk about fostering. It's not just a fostering podcast, but I do talk about it some, or I'm going to have guests on that are foster parents or have that in their life just as every now and then, just in case some people are interested in learning more about it.
Yeah. Well, what is like, I mean, I have the Reawakened Mom podcast. Your podcast is Inspired Grownups. Like, what
Yeah.
does that mean? Like, how did you come up with that title? And what is like an inspired grown up? I'm just curious.
Well, because I work with kids, I always refer to parents as grownups.
Okay.
It's like, oh, your grown up is with you,
Yeah.
because there's moms, there's dads, there's all types of people. So I'm like, oh, your grown-ups with you. So I feel like we're grown-ups because I still feel kind of like a kid, but we're grown up. And then inspired, I think it's so important to do something that you love that inspires you a little bit every day. And whatever that is, maybe it's baking something new. And I'm not really a baker, but I have been baking biscuits lately. It reminds me of my childhood and I love it. And that makes me feel good in the day. Or maybe it is playing a song, or maybe it is doing a little bit of a yoga class, or taking my dogs on a walk, something that you enjoy, that lights you up a little bit, that makes you feel better in the day. Because when we feel better, it rubs off on everybody. I
Yeah.
think especially our children. I think if we're doing something that makes us feel good, then we're going to be happier and a better person for the little people we're around, or even our spouses or partners or anybody we come in contact with. So I just wanted to, create this podcast in a space to remind people to do something they love a little bit every day,
Yeah.
and maybe to share stories of other people that are doing something similar, to just get back to it,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, thanks.
I know it's so fun coming up with the name of something, and you're an artist, so like, that creativity like runs deep through you. But
Mm,
I think names are important, and they have a message in and of themselves. So I love the message of just the name of your podcast. I think it's really important because we can forget who we are and what we used to do when we get into these routines, and like these are our habits and this is what we do and this is just how we do it, and we forget about ourselves a lot of the time as grown-ups.
mhm.
We're putting, especially when you have kids, then you start to put a lot of your time and energy towards your children and making sure they're growing up and living a fulfilling life and making sure they're doing all the things. And then sometimes then you forget about yourself, and are you doing things for yourself? So I love the name of your podcast. I think it's really important.
Thank you. I love the name of your podcast. It's the same, it's similar, like Reawakened. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it means, very similar things. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's why I was like, I have to have her on because it's like we're the same.
Well, that's how I feel about you. I can't wait to, for us to set up a time when you can come on to mine too.
Love that. Yeah, we're gonna be talking all day. So
I
I
know.
would be like, okay, unless we're doing a part two, which we will have to have you back, in 6 months or a year and be like, how are things going? Like give us an update on your little one and kind
I
of
would
what,
love that.
where things stand. And
Yeah.
with you being a grown up, and like, are you inspired in what's happening with your
Mm,
show, or did something else happen? So I think that's really important too. And that's what I love, sharing journeys, because really it doesn't matter your age. It's just a journey. And you never
totally.
know, like, oh, this isn't how I thought my life would turn out, but it's like, but maybe it's better. Maybe it's way better than anything you could have ever imagined. And I think, like you said, I just believe in being open to opportunity, open to possibilities. And you never know where life's going to take you or who you're going to connect with. That's going to be like, oh my God, that's the producer that I needed to meet, like,
Yeah.
for my show.
Totally. Totally.
Those synchronicities. But is there anything that you haven't shared, or like a message that you feel like is on your heart right now for the mamas that might be listening, or the inspired grownups, or the grownups that aren't feeling inspired?
Mm. I don't know what's just coming up for me right now. It's just, I want to just share that you are enough. That's something that I remind myself of a lot. And I think it's so important for mamas to hear that you are enough, whatever you're doing in the day. And sometimes that's just not doing much,
Yeah.
and like letting yourself rest and just being okay with taking the breaks. Because so many times we're going and going, we have schedules, we have all these things to do, but just to stop and think, I am enough, I'm doing enough. And yeah, it's not putting so much pressure, taking the pressure off a little bit.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
it's so
reminding myself of this as well. I think that's what I need to hear today as well.
perfect. I
Yeah.
love those messages, and it's like, oh, I'm actually telling myself that, but sure, I'm sure others
Yeah.
will need to hear this too.
I think that's how a lot of messages come through of like, this is for others, but it's really for yourself too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, that's why I think the podcast is like therapy, because it's like, this
Mhm.
is like on my heart and this is what I need to say for myself. And I know others will resonate because it's not, we all are, a lot of us are going through the same things and we think that we're alone, but there's so many others that are going through it. Maybe not
Yeah.
exactly the same, but having the same thoughts, the same emotions. And so I think, in this world of, especially after the last 2 years of just being so disconnected with people, being forced to be disconnected, I think that, a podcast and doing things like this in community is so important. So I just think knowing that you are enough in whatever you're doing is such a great message.
Thanks. I agree. I,
Awesome. All right. Last question for you, my friend. We as women and mamas do not celebrate ourselves enough. We celebrate everybody else and we're everybody's cheerleader. But I want to know right now, what is something that you love about yourself? Mm.
I love that I can be very silly. I am very silly with our girl. And I think that's why I love writing children's music, because it just helps me not take life so seriously. I think life can be fun and light, even though there's so much heaviness in the world at times. I think that's what I like about myself the most right now, is just like I'm able to just lighten it up. And like I said, I think it's important to process all the heavy things, but like just like this morning I was writing like the silliest, and it wasn't a good song at all, but like just the silliest song about like making breakfast. I don't even remember how it went, but my husband looked at me and was like, "Oh, that's a good one," like as a joke. But I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna write about making French toast, like creating a silly song. So yeah, that's what I like.
Oh, that's so great that you just can acknowledge it. And just, I think that's so true in so many areas of life. Like you're going to do things that like absolutely suck. You're going to be like, that's
Yeah,
horrible. I'm never sharing that with the world. Or maybe you did and you're like, yep, oh, well, there's that one. But you
yeah,
can always go back and look at it because you're like, that's feedback. And this is your growth process,
yeah.
right?
And it
So
makes me laugh. If it's really bad, if I make up a song that's really bad, it makes me laugh. So that's funny too.
and that's, I think, a message to be like, okay, we just need to laugh more in life, right? Like
Yeah.
so seriously, and just move on.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, how can people find you? I know we've said a little bit, but like, where can people find you to get more information and hear these amazing songs that you're putting out?
Oh, thanks. Well, yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at the Alana Banana Show. And that's also where you'll find our videos on YouTube and our music streaming online for your kids at the Alana Banana Show. And then my podcast is Inspired Grownups with Alana Banana.
Oh, I love that. And I will make sure that I put all of that in the show notes too, so that
Thanks.
people can easily find it and find you and go listen to your music. Cause even, your music is for kids, but I mean, adults can listen to it and have just as much fun dancing around it, right?
That's funny. Yeah, sure. They might.
Come on
Yeah.
now. Come on. I'm starting a trend for adults too.
Thanks,
Find a
Melissa.
tune and it's like, oh my God, that's catchy. It's kind of cute.
Yeah. Or everybody knows some kids or somebody that has young kids. I would say our music's for mostly preschoolers, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I used to be a school teacher, and so I used
Mm.
to love reading children's books. And I was like, I didn't even have any like adult books. Like, I was like, I don't read adult books. I read like children's books, and like that makes me happy. I don't know. Until
Yeah.
I got a little bit older, and actually, I do read books, a lot of professional development and like mindset and things like that. But I think
Mhm.
going back to your childhood and just how innocent you were, how you didn't have all that the hard things that we have as adults, I think is important. And it can bring back memories of maybe things that you did as a child that you're like, oh my God, I totally forgot about that. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Forgot I had
Yep.
a beta fish,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And I know the listeners are just going to get so much great information and nuggets from this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. See you soon.